you ever wondered where the term Banana Republic came from? Or what the second poorest country in Central America is? If yes, you're in luck. I've done the deep dive for you, and in this video we're going to unlock all the wild, interesting aspects that make Honduras one for the books. Its history is truly like a non-stop action movie, and its culture is a vibrant, must-see fusion of influences. So stick around to learn more. Before any European set foot on this soil, the land was home to a variety of indigenous groups. The most famous and advanced of these were the Maya, whose influence is still seen today. And who was the first European to spot this place? It's none other than Christopher Columbus, who landed here way back in 1502. It took a couple more decades, but Spain finally began the tough work of conquest around 1525, only truly succeeding by 1539, after fighting with the indigenous populations. So what spurred the Spanish? You guessed it. It's gold. The discovery of gold early in the 16th century was a massive magnet, and in 1544, the Honduran gold mining town of Gracias became the capital of the entire Spanish Central American kingdom. But, as quickly as it started, the gold rush fizzled out. By 1548, the Spaniards had pretty much exhausted the easily accessible gold. Honduras settled into being an agriculture-based province within the vast viceroyalty of New Spain, with its capital being Comayagua. But wait, the treasure hunt wasn't over yet, because in the 1570s, a huge silver strike in the highlands caused a brand new rush of prospectors, which led to the growth of a new population centre, Tegucigalpa. And this new silver hub started competing with Comayagua, and well, you know how that story ends. Tegucigalpa eventually won the rivalry. Now here's why that matters. The conflict drew all the Spanish attention and resources to the mountains. So while the Spanish were busy securing the wealth of the silver mines, they had another massive problem brewing. The coast. Honduras's access to the Caribbean Sea meant it was under constant threat. For long periods, the Spanish basically utilised a soft defence, falling back to the highlands and the Pacific coast, which were safer. This retreat created a vacuum that allowed the British to step in and gain control of the Caribbean's Mosquito coastal region. The British weren't alone, though. They found essential allies in the local Sambo-Miskito peoples. And it wasn't until the 18th century, when the Spanish Bourbon kings decided to push back, that the Spanish were able to regain some control, finishing a major fort at Omoa by 1779. With the Caribbean coastline finally somewhat stabilised and the immediate foreign threats contained, the focus shifted from maintaining the Spanish Empire to dissolving it. So, the early 1800s marked a period where the entire region, inspired by revolutionary movements across the Americas, was buzzing with the spirit of independence. Honduras officially declared its independence from Spain in 1821, but like many Central American nations, it didn't immediately become the fully independent country we know today. First, it joined the short-lived Mexican Empire, and then, in 1823, it became part of the United Provinces of Central America, later named Federal Republic of Central America, alongside Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. Unfortunately, that federation was constantly undermined by friction between two major political camps, the Liberals and the Conservatives. In fact, a Honduran liberal, Francisco Morazan, became president of the federation in 1830 and tried to push his reforms through. But the opposition, especially the Conservatives, was too strong, and the federation collapsed. And that was how Honduras finally declared its absolute full independence on November 5th, 1838. From there, the Conservatives took the reins under Francisco Ferreira, and they held power for a while, even regaining the church's influence. But by the 1870s, the Liberals made a powerful comeback, and in 1880, they put out a new constitution. So the 20th century starts, and despite the liberal push for growth, Honduras was still the poorest country on the isthmus. And what was the biggest driver of its economy? Bananas. American corporations like the infamous United Fruit Company poured capital into the country, building infrastructure, and basically dominating the economy. Fun fact, this was actually the period when the term Banana Republic was coined, and Honduras became the quintessential example. This tight economic link meant the US military often got involved, with President William Howard Taft sending in the US Marines in 1911 and 1912 to protect American banana investments. And for most of the 20th century, politics was a cycle of military rule and fragile civilian governments. This cycle included one of the longest periods of military-backed rule from 1932 to 1949 under General Tiburcio Carillas Andino. Tensions culminated in 1969 with one of the most bizarre conflicts in modern history, the soccer war with El Salvador. Though sparked by a soccer match, the real causes were deep-seated economic and demographic issues. Now, let's fast forward to the 1980s. This is perhaps the most intense chapter. Because while its neighbours were engulfed in civil wars, Honduras was transformed into a crucial staging ground for the US-backed covert war against Latin American communism. So as you can imagine, this period brought immense human rights abuses. Hundreds of people disappeared during this time. And even after Honduras finally elected a civilian government in 1981, ending 17 years of military rule, the military still held much of the real power, backed by the massive US presence. Then, the late 1980s brought a collective push from Central American governments for regional peace, which gradually led to pressure to limit military activity and reduce the US presence. This paved the way for a huge moment of hope. The 1990s started on a truly positive note, when the opposition National Party took office peacefully in 1990. But this political breakthrough was quickly overshadowed by immense hardship. Economic struggles just kept going. And then, in October 1998, they were hit by a natural calamity. Hurricane Mitch. This storm caused thousands of fatalities and basically crippled the country's economy and infrastructure for years. Then, just as the country was trying to find its footing in the 21st century, the stability was shattered again in 2009, when the sitting president, Manuel Zelaya, was booted out in an internationally condemned military coup. That was a serious setback that pushed the country back into political instability. But the story of resilience keeps going, because the 21st century has also brought moments of massive change. In November 2021, history was made when Xiomara Castro was elected president, making her Honduras's first ever woman president. That is a huge, hopeful step forward, even though the country still grapples with big, complex challenges, which we'll talk about later. For now, let's see where all these events are happening. Honduras is essentially a massive, rough-edged triangle, sitting right at the widest point of the Central American Isthmus. To the west, it's bordered by Guatemala and El Salvador, and to the east and southeast, it shares a long border with Nicaragua. When we look at its size, Honduras is the second largest country in Central America, after Nicaragua, clocking in around 112,777 square kilometres, or 43,543 square miles. And this land we can divide into 5 parts. First, the interior highlands, and this is where the majority of the Honduran population lives, including the capital, Tegucigalpa. The mountains here are intense. To the west, you'll find the highest peaks, like the majestic Cerro Las Minas, soaring to 9,420 feet, or 2,870 metres. Besides that, another crucial feature of the highlands is a massive depression, essentially a natural cross-country path that runs all the way from the Caribbean coast down to the Golfo de Fonseca. This depression acts as a historical highway, dividing the mountain range and making it easier to cross the isthmus. Now let's head north to the coast to enter the Caribbean lowlands, which is essentially just a strip of river valleys and coastal plains. The most developed area is along the Rio Ulua near the Guatemalan border, which is the country's industrial and commercial hub. It's where you'll find Puerto Cortés, the country's largest port, and San Pedro Sula, the industrial capital. On the far eastern side, near Nicaragua, the lowlands explode into a huge remote area known as the Mosquitia. This area is completely different. It's the least developed, very thinly inhabited, and culturally distinct. It consists of inland savanna interspersed with swamps and coastal mangroves, often turning into a massive, shallow inland sea during the heavy rainy season. And how can we talk about the Caribbean without mentioning the islands? Offshore, the beautiful Islas de la Bahia is a world-famous destination. The main islands are Roatan, Utila, and Guanaja. Finally, we head south to the smallest region, the Pacific lowlands. This is a narrow, flat strip of land on the north shore of the Golfo de Fonseca, And the land here is flat and often swampy, and the extensive mangrove forests along the coast provide crucial, safe breeding grounds for local wildlife. But despite this beautiful landscape, Honduras is recognized as Central America's second poorest country. And let's see why. Long story short, the country's facing high corruption, weak institutions, extreme income inequality, and political instability, compounded by overdependence on agriculture, vulnerability to climate disasters, high crime/violence, and limited investment in education and infrastructure. On the bright side, its economy is showing much progress. The total GDP was about $37.09 billion in 2024, and the economy is growing steadily, projected to expand by a solid 3.3% in 2025. On top of that, unemployment is trending down, expected to be around 6.1% in 2025. Not bad at all. So where's all the money coming from? Remittances. That's the money sent home by Hondurans working abroad, and it accounts for about 25.7% of the GDP. Besides that, what else is driving this growth? Well, you've got the huge textile industry. If you're wearing clothes right now, they might have been made in Honduras. Companies love the access they get through the CAFTA-ADR trade agreement and the benefit of nearshoring, which is moving manufacturing closer to the US. This is why cities like San Pedro Sula are seeing huge investment. And of course, we can't forget about Agro-Exports. Farming still makes up about 12% of the GDP. We're talking coffee, bananas, palm oil, and seafood. Farmers are even pushing hard for more sustainable production to meet demand in Europe and North America. You know why? Because Honduras is actually a regional champion in clean energy, with over 60% of its electricity coming from renewable sources like solar and hydro as of 2022. And they're hoping to transition to 80% renewable electricity by 2038. Okay, so now that we understand the economy a little bit better, let's take a look at what's behind all that. When you look at the people, you'll find that the majority of the population is mestizo, meaning they have a mix of Spanish and indigenous heritage. And only about 7% have purely indigenous ancestry, but the traditions of the ancient cultures are still a huge part of the national identity. You see, the indigenous heartbeat of the nation, particularly the Lenca and Maya cultures, pulses right through modern Honduras. You can explore Lenca villages and witness their time-honoured practices, from making intricate pottery in places like La Esperanza to creating beautiful stone carvings inspired by the ancient Maya in the ruins of Copan. It's honestly like stepping into a living, breathing history book. But the story gets even richer when you head to the coast, because along the Caribbean, you find the incredible Garifuna people. They bring a powerful, infectious spirit to life, blending African, Arawakan, and Carib cultures. You have to dive into their world of music and dance. When you hear the beat of their lively Punta dance, it's impossible not to join in. Seriously, Honduran music is a cultural tapestry, from that Punta groove to the infectious cumbia. This cultural fusion is also visible in the architecture. Wander through historic cities like Comayagua and Gratias, and you'll see the echoes of Spanish elegance in the colonial architecture and centuries-old churches, creating this captivating, historical ambience. Now let's talk about the food, because food and drink are always at the centre of social gatherings here. You absolutely have to bite into a baleada. It's like the ultimate Honduran breakfast or snack, a simple, delicious flour tortilla folded over mashed beans, cheese and cream. And of course, you'll want to savour the national dish, the plato típico, which is a savoury mountain of flavours. All in all, Honduras is just a blast of colour, rhythm and flavour, where ancient heritage and modern spirit dance together. Have you ever been to Honduras or learned about it from your history books? If so, share your most interesting discovery about this country that other people might not know about in the comments below. Now, in the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, you'll love this next one.